There are moments in life that seem completely ordinary until one quiet realization changes the meaning of everything that came before. Your soulmate may have recently experienced one of those moments. Nothing dramatic happened. There was no unexpected message, no surprising encounter, no conversation that immediately changed their world. Instead, it began with something much quieter, a question, one they had never truly asked themselves before. As they moved through another ordinary day, they may have noticed how quickly life had been passing. Responsibilities continued to grow, familiar routines repeated themselves, and weeks slowly became months before they even realized how much time had disappeared. For a brief moment they stopped, not because they were searching for someone, not because they were trying to revisit the past, but because they suddenly realized how many important memories had quietly shaped the person they had become. That thought stayed with them longer than they expected. It encouraged them to look back not with regret but with curiosity. Who had truly influenced their life? Which people had changed them without ever realizing it? Which experiences had quietly become part of the person they are today? As these questions unfolded, one memory continued returning with unusual clarity. It wasn't simply about a conversation. It wasn't about a particular day. It was about a feeling that had once brought a rare sense of peace. Your soulmate may now be recognizing that certain emotions cannot be measured by how long they lasted. Some emotions become meaningful because they reveal something honest about who we are. Perhaps your connection became one of those rare experiences, not because everything was perfect, but because it showed them a version of themselves they had almost forgotten. They remember laughing without trying too hard. They remember feeling understood without needing to explain every emotion. They remember moments where silence itself felt comfortable. These are the memories now returning to them, not to pull them backward, but to help them understand what genuine emotional safety once felt like. For many years, they may have believed that strength meant becoming independent enough to need no one. They admired self-control. They respected emotional distance. They convinced themselves that protecting their heart was the wisest choice they could make. Yet something inside them has slowly begun questioning that belief. What if true strength is not found in avoiding emotional risk? What if real courage begins the moment we stop hiding from what matters? Those questions have become impossible to ignore. Every answer seems to guide them toward greater honesty. Instead of judging themselves for past choices, they are beginning to understand why those choices were made. Fear often disguises itself as logic. Pride often sounds like confidence. Silence often pretends to be peace. Only later do we realize they were simply different ways of avoiding vulnerability. That realization has become one of the most meaningful lessons of their recent journey. Instead of asking whether the past can be rewritten, they are asking something far more important. How do I become someone who no longer allows fear to make every emotional decision? That question has quietly changed the way they see everything: relationships, family, friendship, trust, even themselves. They are beginning to notice that the life they truly want cannot be built through emotional distance alone. It must also include honesty, patience, compassion, and the willingness to be fully present when something genuinely meaningful enters their life. Perhaps that is the quiet transformation unfolding within them today. Not because someone forced them to change, not because circumstances demanded it, but because their own heart has finally become ready to tell them a truth they were never able to hear before. Sometimes the greatest awakening arrives without noise. It begins with one honest question, and a heart that is finally willing to listen. As that quiet awakening continues, your soulmate may begin noticing that the answers they have been searching for were never completely outside of them. For a long time they believed that clarity would arrive through circumstances. They thought the right moment would appear. The perfect sign would reveal itself. Life would eventually explain everything they had been unable to understand. But recently something has begun changing. Instead of waiting for the world to provide certainty, they have started paying attention to their own inner voice. At first, that voice was almost impossible to hear. It had been buried beneath responsibilities, expectations, distractions, and years of convincing themselves that emotions could simply be ignored. Yet every quiet moment has made it a little stronger. Every honest reflection has made it a little clearer. Now they are beginning to recognize a truth that once felt uncomfortable. The connections that shape us most deeply are rarely the ones we can easily explain. They become part of our character, part of our values, part of the choices we make long after the circumstances themselves have changed. Your connection may have become one of those quiet influences, not because it demanded attention, but because it quietly remained present beneath everything else. Your soulmate may now notice that certain qualities they admire in others remind them of lessons they first discovered through this connection. Kindness feels more meaningful. Patience carries greater value. Honesty no longer seems like a weakness. These changes may appear small, yet together they represent a completely different way of living. For perhaps the first time, they understand that emotional maturity is not measured by how well someone hides their feelings. It is measured by how honestly they are willing to understand them. This realization brings unexpected peace. Instead of fighting old memories, they allow them to exist without judgment. Instead of asking whether they should have been different years ago, they appreciate how every experience contributed to the person they are becoming today. That shift changes everything, because healing rarely begins when someone forgets. Healing begins when someone no longer fears remembering. As this understanding grows, they may also become more aware of the present. They notice meaningful conversations more deeply. They appreciate sincere people more quickly. They become less interested in appearances and more interested in authenticity. Perhaps those around them are already sensing this quiet transformation. Their words carry greater intention. Their decisions reflect greater wisdom. Their relationships become more balanced because they are no longer trying to protect themselves from every possible disappointment. Instead, they are learning to trust their own ability to face whatever life brings. That confidence does not come from certainty. It comes from self-awareness, and self-awareness creates a kind of freedom that cannot be given by anyone else. Perhaps this is why your soulmate no longer sees the past through the same eyes. Where they once noticed mistakes, they now recognize lessons. Where they once focused on endings, they now recognize growth. Where they once carried questions, they now carry understanding. This does not erase every unanswered chapter. Life rarely offers perfect conclusions. Yet peace does not always require complete certainty. Sometimes peace arrives the moment we stop resisting what our heart has quietly known all along. Perhaps that is the greatest gift of this journey. Not the promise of a particular future, not the certainty of a specific outcome, but the quiet confidence that comes from living more honestly than before. If another meaningful opportunity ever appears, they know they will meet it differently. Not because they expect everything to unfold perfectly, but because they have become someone who values truth more than fear, someone who understands that genuine connection asks for presence rather than perfection, someone who no longer believes that silence is always the safest answer. And perhaps that is the final lesson this chapter was always meant to reveal. Life changes us through moments that seem ordinary at first. One thoughtful question, one unexpected memory, one honest reflection. Together they become the beginning of an entirely new way of seeing ourselves. Your soulmate may not have recognized that transformation when it first began. But now, as they continue moving forward with greater clarity, they are becoming someone who trusts their heart without allowing fear to speak louder than wisdom. The journey was never about returning to who they once were. It was about discovering who they are capable of becoming. And sometimes, that quiet discovery becomes the most meaningful turning point of all.